Welcome to the Business of Hearing podcast, the podcast for high-performing hearing care clinics that want to learn the strategies, ideas, and truths behind some of the smartest private practice clinics in the world. Now, time for your hosts, Phil M. Jones and Ollie Luke.
So, ahoy, we are coming in live. Room is filling up. I have the delightful Stephen Shapiro here in real time. We are on the same time zone, Stephen, which is even better, right?
It's great.
So we are not trying to go transatlantic at this moment in time. I see some of our superstars from the inner circle coming in to join us live. So thank you so much for being here. And what I'd say to all of you who are here in attendance live with front row seats in this inner circle discussion with Stephen Shapiro is if you have questions, you have things you want me to ask of Stephen, things that you want to add his information towards in your business, then be sure to use the Q&A function, use the chat function. I'll be following that and be your voice throughout. So with that much said, let's get this show on the road. Stephen, welcome to our Inner Circle interview. It is a delight to be able to have you here. For those of you who do not know Stephen Shapiro, Stephen is not only a dear friend of mine, but a 6-time best-selling author, creator of Personality Poker, introduced to the Speaking Hall of Fame back in 2015. And I know he doesn't look old enough for that to be true. And he's the go-to expert for dozens of global brands on all things to do with innovation. And most recently wrote a brilliant book, which you might see right up here in Invisible Solutions, that I know I've invited all of you to read. And I think right now when we're trying to navigate some of the difficulties that the hearing care industry are facing with, the 25 lenses shared in this book are something that allows us to think differently. But Stephen, welcome to the show.
Well, fantastic to be here, Phil. Always great to be able to spend time with somebody so brilliant as yourself. So I'm sure this is going to be a great time.
So, Stephen, you've spent the bulk of your time in the area of helping companies innovate or to understand and explore innovation within their organization. But what does innovation mean to you? Because I feel like it's an overused word, but not necessarily that well clearly defined.
Yeah, I think this is a big struggle for a lot of organizations. I have a very simple definition. It's one word, which is relevance. And the means of that is being adaptable. So you put those two together and you end up with innovation. It's not about change for change's sake. It's not about novelty for novelty's sake. It's not about ideas. It's not about a lot of the things that many people think are the basis of innovation. It really is about moving the organization in a way that keeps you relevant in the minds of your customers, your clients, consumers, so that at the end of the day, you have a valuable proposition to the market.
One of the big things I liked about the entry of your book is this idea of asking great questions. For anybody who knows anything about my work, is I'm often helping people ask better questions to allow them to create more relevance for their offer, their product, their service in the moment. But you talk about how industries are often trying to solve the wrong problem through asking the wrong question. What are some of the examples of things that you see crop up all the time where people are asking the wrong question, therefore they're looking for solutions to solve the incorrect problem?
This happens look, it happened, just a matter of months ago when we couldn't meet in person. I want to be clear, there aren't necessarily wrong questions or right questions, but questions just lead you down a different path.
Okay.
So if the goal is relevance, we want to make sure that we're asking questions that move us in the direction of relevance. In a lot of cases, we're asking questions that are moving us in the direction of irrelevance. But you think about the meetings industry, the first question everybody asked is, how do we basically take our in-person experience and move it virtually? And from my perspective, that's not a bad question. That was a knee-jerk reaction question. But when you start to look at what that means, is it means that we spend all of our time on Zoom and we have Zoom fatigue, and are we really doing what we need to do? So sometimes a better question, just to use this as a simple example, would be to say, well, how do we take full advantage of the virtual environment? How do we engage people when we're doing things virtually? How do we eliminate the need for real-time synchronous meetings and create asynchronous content that creates enough value so that when we get together as a group, we're really hyper-focused on collaboration. So now the real-time conversations are truly about collaboration rather than just content dissemination. So these are the types of questions that I'm always looking at.
Yeah, and even to build on that example is, I remember reframing the question in my head is not how do I move my presentations to virtual, but how do I translate a message to support a home-based workforce? That was the question, is how do I create content that supports a home-based workforce, not how do I deliver at virtual events? And I think that was a big change in my mind. We've seen a lot within the hearing care space be forced through change right now, be forced through the thought of they can't get to their patients, or their patients don't feel comfortable or confident coming into a clinic environment, or there's been mandates by states that have said that you cannot do X, Y, and Z. So much of that innovation has been forced. Why do you think that people typically wait till an external force kicks in to create a change that results in a better customer experience or an improved business operation?
A lot of it has to do with how we're wired as human beings. So we are primarily wired as human beings for survival, not innovation and change. And so what that means is whatever we did in the past was safe, didn't kill us, therefore it's safe enough to do in the future. And so in a lot of cases, it's that survival mentality, which means don't try something different. But there's also a little bit of ego involved. Hey, we were successful in the past, therefore let's continue to do what we've done in the past, do it in the future. And unfortunately, I know there's that mantra, past success is no guarantee of future success. I believe it's much more bleak than that. I think past success is a pretty good predictor of future failure. If you can't shift your mindset, the odds are you're just going to be doing incremental improvements when we're not in a world of incremental change.
I want you to convince me on that, right? I like that conceptual theory of like, if you're not innovating or if you're trying to use past success as your steering for future, then inevitably that's going to lead to failure. I get that conceptually. I also know that as an industry, the hearing care profession has hung on to the past like crazy. And I don't know whether they'll quite get what you mean. Where are there examples where people have just lost relevance through trying to hold on to the past?
I mean, there are, and I don't even know if they were consciously trying to hold on to the past, but they just assumed the past. So, I mean, companies that you'd all know, Sears. Sears in the 1960s was 1% of the US gross national product. 1 out of every 2 American households had a Sears credit card in the 1970s. 1 out of 22 people in the United States actually received a paycheck in one form or another because of Sears. They were irrelevant. Kodak, we don't need to go there. Circuit City was in the book Good to Great. They should have been in the book Good to Gone. So look, there are just so many examples of how companies and organizations and industries, the taxi industry, became irrelevant when somebody developed the ride-sharing concepts. So things change, and it's not even always, and I think this is an important point, is a lot of times we assume a technology or a competitor is going to put us out of business. In many cases, what puts us out of business are societal changes or economic changes or generational changes. So cigarettes obviously were very popular. Now they're not. Fast food, they have to be reinventing themselves to be focused on being healthier. Even financial services, a lot of the Gen X and Gen Z, they have a different perspective on retirement and saving and insurance than some others do. And so each of those shifts cause shifts in the industries that are impacted by them.
Okay. So a lot of the obstacles that are faced by hearing care right now is that competition are finding ways of being able to say we can do it quicker, faster, or cheaper, right? Is some form of convenience play that says we can get you the same for less. We can, we can try and speed up this operation and charge you less for it. That's where the focus is often from people outside the industry looking to be able to disrupt or create a steal on where the margin exists. I love the story that you share about the airports looking to innovate around how to speed up the baggage scenario. Would you mind sharing that just for the benefit for anybody who hasn't yet taken the time to read some of your work?
Sure. So the short version of the story is that, first of all, Phil, you and I, we traveled a lot in the past, and so it's so funny
reading that in your book. It's like, hey, I travel 200 days a year, and I'm like, you don't do that anymore.
I did, and it's funny because I know a lot of times we would complain about travel, and I was like, oh, I can't wait to travel again. But so one of the airports here in the U.S., they asked their passengers what their biggest complaint was. It was that the bags took too long because you get off of a long flight, you don't want to have to wait for your bag. So they decided to solve the problem. How can we speed up the bags? And so they did some analysis, and they found that it took the bags 15 to 20 minutes to get from the plane to the baggage carousel. So in order to speed up the bags, they spent a ton of money on faster conveyor belts, more baggage handlers, newer technology. They got it from 15 to 20 minutes down to 8 to 10 minutes. Now, if you cut the time in half, if you were to basically 2x the speed, most of us would declare success. But the passengers were still complaining. And there's a point of diminishing returns in any investment. So they knew they couldn't really get it any faster than 8 minutes. And then they had an epiphany. They realized that it took the bags 8 to 10 minutes to get from the plane to the baggage carousel. But at this particular airport, it only took the passengers 1 to 3 minutes to get from the plane to the baggage carousel. So instead of speeding up the bags, you probably guessed it, they slowed down the passengers. They literally reconfigured the airport so that it would take, on average, 8 to 10 minutes for the bags to get from the plane to the baggage carousel. They get to the baggage carousel, their bags are waiting, people are happy. And so it just goes to show you that we start off with a problem of speed of bags, but then we go to speed of passengers. But then we look at, is it really about that, or is it about wait time, which is not the same as speed of bags, but rather it's the combination of the speed of the passengers and the bags. And we can just play with this for a long time. And this is such a rich and robust example.
So I want to take that example, I want to pivot it towards hearing care, right? If I look at what Google search tells us, and if I look at what lots of people are asking for, and I look at where competition are disrupting the industry, what we would be led to believe is that people want cheaper hearing devices. There's recently been a statute given down in government that says over-the-counter hearing aids are soon to be a thing where somebody can walk in and purchase these like they could over-the-counter drugs that are all being predicted to be at a significantly lower price point again. So to give you some of the numbers on this, typical professional medical model hearing care practice would be dispensing hearing aids for a price point between $4,000 and $7,000 would be typical. And that comes with all of the service, ongoing care, lifetime support, yada, 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 right? So a proper comprehensive service. The disruptors are coming in and saying that we can get this to you almost in a direct-to-consumer model at $2,500, $3,000 a pair. And OTC is threatening to be able to come to this market, $1,000 a pair, $700 a pair, $1,200 a pair. Talk about brands like Bose entering the marketplace, etc., and cutting out the need for the professional. This is all very much real disruption towards this industry right now. And I wanted to just throw you that curveball and say, okay, how do we innovate ourselves out of this? Because I loved reading in your work that you like to be able to help create jobs. Right? That's one thing that you bring towards innovation, not how technology can remove people. The fear in this industry is all the direct-to-consumer plays are cutting out the need for the professional. Yet, if I look at consumer research, the consumer actually agrees entirely that the professional is necessary. So let me give you that. Ask any questions that would come back. How would you apply your lenses? What would you do to think around this to allow an independent business owner that operates in the hearing care space that needs to make margin on this service to differentiate and adapt from here?
Sure. So I think, I have a number of clients in similar, I would call them high-end industries. And I'm just going to share something real quickly. It's just a blank screen, but I'd like to just do a couple of quick things with you. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pull up my lenses. That's might even be better. So in the book, there's 25 different lenses, and let me just share this real quickly, because I think this will be interesting. One of the lenses that's sort of the simplest of all the lenses, but it's one that I really like, is the substitute lens.
Okay.
And the substitute lens, I'll put my face there so you can see me. The substitute lens basically says, how do we just change one word in a problem statement? So the assumption is right now that over-the-counter and commoditization is a competition. And what I find, one of the conversations I have with a lot of my luxury clients is, how do we substitute the word competition with collaborator? Because there might be opportunities here. If you view them as competition, now it's us against them, as opposed to saying, well, maybe we both play in the same space and we bring different things to the market. And maybe there's a way that we can actually raise up the entire industry rather than trying to have this big battle between. So I think that's where my mind always goes anytime we start talking about.
I like that thinking even in the first place. If you think about OTC in particular, there's a great opportunity there for you to use them as almost a gateway drug to professional hearing care, or similarly a downsell when somebody isn't ready to make a full investment, almost training wheels before buying your first bike, that way around, because they're going to have limited capabilities within programming. They're not going to have somebody who's going to allow these to be custom fit. It's the difference between buying a suit off the rack and then having it tailor-made on Savile Row, right? There's demonstrable differences. But I like your viewpoint there of saying, how do we view this as a collaborator as opposed to a competitor, to give us the chance to be able to say, what can we do to grow the pie? Because the interesting thing that I've always found fascinating in the hearing care profession is the number of people that choose to treat themselves hasn't grown in over 30 years. So the quantity of people with a hearing loss is this big, the quantity of people that choose to treat it is this big, and the growth comes from things like that level of collaboration. So I like that. What else though might you do, right? Is we can view it as a collaboration. What else could we do if we applied that same problem through one of your other lenses, to think about other ways we could approach that same problem?
Yeah, and I just want to say I really liked what you just said, because I think there's always untapped markets. And so one of the other things, and this comes back to, I'll go back to one of these lenses here, which is the reduced lens. And the reduced lens is not necessarily even for a company, but it's for an industry, is how do we make something more accessible? Because the more you can create a gateway product for people, the better it is. And so the reduced lens was inspired by 2008, when Xbox, it was, one of the dominant players, and PlayStation was one of the dominant players, and Nintendo was just sort of a teeny weeny player in the whole thing. And then they decided, we're going to introduce the Wii. And the Nintendo Wii in 2008 actually outsold the Xbox and the PlayStation combined. And what it did was it ushered in a whole new level of people deciding to get involved in gaming. Now, did it eliminate the people who wanted the high-end games? No. I think that still is something that people want. But what it did was it introduced more people, and we're seeing the same thing even now with mobile game. Revenues from games on your phone are actually generating more than the entire console industry. And so this is, I just did an event for one of the big console gaming companies, and this was the big part of our conversation, is how do we compete against mobile, as opposed to how do we leverage what's going on there, which is another lens, which is the leverage lenses. Maybe there's a way to leverage what they're doing to piggyback on it and actually use their marketing, use their strength as a way of bringing in our products.
And we're doing much of that, Stephen, with some of our inner circle clients, when you think about those that are claiming to be able to sell the same for less, right? Which is where a big part of this differentiator coming in. They're saying, don't go wait in a clinic, don't pay over the odds for time that you don't need. We can do this from a distance. We can deliver it all remote. It's the same for less is primarily their argument. We are saying, how do we leverage those heavy marketing budgets that are hitting Facebook ads like crazy, hitting Google ads, and they've got some of the most sophisticated marketing on the planet, and like 7-figure retargeting funds to come out through Google, etc. Is how do we ride that? Well, what we do is we leverage it, and we make sure we talk about that same story and say, here's what makes us different to Lively, or whoever else we're talking about. Is that, here's the differences you get directly from choosing us over Costco or Sam's Club or any of those other major disruptors that have hit the industry. Is we say, we will take the noise they create and then leverage that noise to be able to say, let's now put the focus on the differences, not the same. It's like, yep, we can do the same as that, and that. Oh, and these things. If you value these things, we're a better choice.
Right. And that brings us to two additional lenses that are sort of related. One is the pain versus gain lens, which says that a lot of people will make decisions not based on something that is positive, but the elimination of a pain. And the more you can articulate that, and the pain isn't necessarily, hearing loss, but it's like, what would be the downside of going with a lower cost alternative? What are you missing out on? What are the, and so I think there's a really great pain versus gain. The example that I use when I'm like giving a speech, but that I love, is most bed manufacturers try to convince you that buying their mattress will give you the best night's sleep. But the pain version of that equation is a commercial from Boston where basically this guy gets out a mattress. He starts vacuuming the mattress that was 8 years old, and then he empties the canister, and it was just filled with gunk. And he said, if your mattress is over 8 years old, it will weigh twice its original weight due to the dead skin cells and dust mites that have accumulated over the years. So we can play on those types of things. People do have fears, and you don't want to play on people's fears, but what would be the cost of that, which then leads to the emotion lens, which is, a lot of times we look at these things from a very intellectual perspective, but we need to understand people at an emotional level. What is it that they're missing out on? What is it that we can speak to them? So it's like, what's the emotional signal? Because people buy an emotion, this. So people buy an emotion,
Yep.
not logic. How do we sell that emotion?
There's such a good point there as well is if we take that pain versus gain piece, take it to the hearing care industry, try to solve some of the obstacles we have here right now, is we can use the educated hearing aid wearer to explain why they continually work through a professional because of the fact they've experienced the pain-gain relationship that exists after the point of sale, which is primarily the window where the people listening to this get to win, is they outperform the competition after the transaction has been made as opposed to beforehand. So even if you think about leaning into the pain of a simple warranty claim, if you've got to make a warranty claim for an adjustment, a repair, anything on your hearing devices through any of those other purchasing solutions, you've got to call a phone number, press 1 for this, press 6 for the other, press 2 for this, to then complete a form, to then go to a mailing office to send your device away, to be without a set of hearing aids for a period of time, hoping that they're going to come back, and then hoping that you're going to get the result you're looking for. Alternative is through yourselves, is either stop by, call us, and we'll take care of the whole thing, put you in a set of loaners in between. Like I don't think we do enough to be able to explain that difference in a pain versus gain thing, where what we can do is we can talk about the pain post initial fitting, should you choose one of these other options. And without beating the other person up, just being factual to say that this isn't apples for apples. It's a completely different point of view.
And I just want to build on that for a second, is because I do think this is obviously time sensitive, but obviously not, actually I don't have the actual statistics, but my assumption is the target audience for these products are more at-risk patients or at-risk in COVID.
Yep.
So do you want to have somebody who is afraid to go out of their house right now, and they just want to they want to do it once, get it done and get it right and never have to deal with it, as opposed to saying, okay, well, imagine now next week there's a possibility you're going to have to leave your house, go somewhere, or be without. So there's, again, you don't want to get too morbid on this, but I think that there's certainly some leverage points there that would probably have some value, especially right now.
And I want to riff off your assumption there as well, because you're right. The majority of customer base for hearing care fall into what many would class as at risk, whether it's flu, whether it's COVID, whatever it might be. Yet what we're still dealing with in the industry as a whole is a giant stigma around wearing of hearing aids in its entirety. There is a problem in the fact that I always loved when I met this industry for the first time a decade ago, is you're asking somebody to buy something that fundamentally they don't want to own, that is, 3 to 4 times the sum of money that they thought it was going to be, that will work about a third as well as they hoped it would, and even when they own it, they choose to tell nobody, right? It's an interesting, what many would class as a commodity purchase that makes you feel significantly older, like the acceptance of treatment in this, as in the point where you swipe your credit card, is an acceptance of the fact that you're not where you used to be. So how do you break that stigma down? Is what would you apply to say, how do we communicate differently to start eroding that stigma? We're not going to solve it overnight, but if you take your outside view on it, is how can we make the treatment of hearing loss a little less ugly, a little less you're old, you're broken?
Yeah. And I would imagine that's an interesting challenge, and it does come back to what you're saying, is maybe the people who actually buy the products are older because they're happy to accept that they're older, but the people who are younger who still have that need might not. Not in this book, but in my previous book, I gave an example, and it's 10 years old, so it's a little outdated, but I loved the thinking that one of the hearing aid manufacturers used. They said, well, people have a stigma associated. People don't want it. So what they did was they created hearing aids that sort of looked like a combination of jewelry and Bluetooth earpieces. And at the time, it actually worked really well, because now all of a sudden it went from being this, oh, this is an old person item, to, wow, only hip, cool people have Bluetooth headphones and things like that. And so it really, at least for them in their market, was an interesting way to come at it. Let's see, what lenses would be really good for this one? Let me just give some thought. Well, so the variation.
I'm even thinking about your lens around saying, is there a metaphor that sits alongside this too, of other things that we aid when they become, when we find a point of resistance or a point of friction? What are all the other things that we are prepared to spend money on to enhance our experience with?
Yeah, and that's the analogy lens.
Yeah.
So the analogy lens is really just about how do we just ask two words: who else? Who else has solved a similar problem? So who else overcomes? And I don't have a quick answer off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's a lot of industries out there that overcome anything that has to do with the stigma, gets people to do things they don't want to do, and it doesn't even have to be in healthcare. But I'm sure there's a lot of different areas where. I don't know. Would anything come to mind for you with that one?
Let's play with this, because it's a real thing, right? There's chance to apply a few different lenses here. There's a window of opportunity that exists right now because of mask wearing culture. Wearing masks alongside hearing aids is a challenge for many. I was chatting with one of our Inner Circle members the other day who's purchased a series of sort of bands that sit around this lower part of your neck here that then you can connect your mask to, so that what happens is you don't have to have the mask elastics affecting losing of your hearing devices. But I'm wondering, if you take that point and you then collaborate with some local fashion designers or some local people who are manufacturing, is could you create a collaboration where, sexy contemporary masks made by local people that are on trend, that are desirable towards a more fashion conscious demographic, are being produced in line with hearing aid wearers, and be able to create a collaboration, would be one way of starting to bring a different lens, right? A different level of visibility towards, hearing aids aren't for old broken people. We made one change recently, which was a revelation to me, and I'd like to get your take on it, is we changed language on the bulk of our clients' websites that were talking about patients. So we help our patients, we help our patients. And we are working through a process of changing the words patients to people in almost every set of circumstances, under the guise of saying, how do we reduce the stigma? And I think for you to accept to be a patient, you've got to admit that you're broken. Whereas aiding something is different. I think we aid a lot of things, right? We might have a knee brace on our left leg if we want to continue running because we really enjoy staying in shape. What are other things that we aid that aren't necessarily health conscious? We aid ourselves with kitchen appliances, right? We used to be able to say, well, we're going to chop, slice, and dice everything, but now we have food processors and mixers to be able to do these things. We used to light a fire in order to be able to make sure that we would heat things. Now we have ovens and stoves and high quality pans. We used to love gas because it would give us instant heat, but what we then had was the issue of the fact that the stovetop would always need cleaning. Now lots of people have moved to induction tops that allow them to be able to get instant heat, cleanliness, and safeness. That means that if you've got kids and young families, you can still get some of those things. So I think there are examples in every area where we've aided something in our life to allow us to keep doing what we've always done and remove some of the other frictions. So that would be one thing. And there's another thought I'd love to get your take on. It's what about changing who the customer is? You can't change who the user is, but you could change who the customer is. And I think particularly as people get older, they are resistant to change at a higher level, right? Is their adaptability to embrace new things becomes less and less and less. And you double down as you get older, like, nope, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm fine as I am. I hear what I want to hear. Right? These are typical objections that exist. Is what about pivoting the customer to somebody else who's experienced them in the pain? Dinner table with my grandpa or my dad is becoming a nuisance because.
Yeah, so that's a great example of the reassign lens. The reassign lens basically says who, so who's doing the work or who are we targeting. We use this lens when I was working with a pharmaceutical company, and one of the things that they wanted to do was they were on this quest to get guys to get physical exams.
Yeah,
it was targeted at men, but most men are never going to say, yeah, I want somebody to go doing those things that we don't want them to do to us. But so a lot of the target work was either around men's communities, like communities. So it actually was around guys, but it wasn't about the individual guys, but the community of guys and actually elevating people who they felt were cool, and they were doing it sort of an influencer model. But the other thing was targeting some of the ads targeted families, and how do we get the kids and because the kids are the ones who feel like, Daddy, I don't want you to die, and pulling on their heartstrings. And so there's always ways of targeting different people who are impacted, whether it's communities of people or individuals who have influence over those people.
Yeah, and you're so right. And I had an example talked about a few times over, that when people were looking to originally launch like even drugs like Viagra, is that they were aiming it towards men, but then when they shifted it towards females, they saw a huge uptick in response rate, because of the fact it was people who were being affected by the problem as opposed to people who have the problem. And I think that's something we can all do a lot of work with from a content marketing point of view, is to say, who are the people affected by hearing loss that aren't the person with the hearing loss, and make sure we're approaching every one of those user groups with a well-targeted sequence of joined up communications around it. And we naturally jump to spouse, but what about the children of, the colleagues of, the co-workers of, the bosses of? If your boss says to you, you got to fix that hearing problem, otherwise your job's in jeopardy. Like, is that going to become a motivator that says now's the time to be able to do something? The answer is probably yes. How we get to that is not easy. But with every form of innovation, we're looking at the same problem from a different lens, right? And we're trying to experiment with new solutions. Okay.
Yeah, let me bounce something else off of you, because one of the things that we tend to talk a lot about is, we're talking about selling a product. But products are a means to an end. And so the result lens is saying, what are we really selling? If we're not selling, hearing devices, what are we selling? And it seems as though most of the time we talk about the physical device or the services, but not what it creates for the individual and what's possible. And so is there anything around that resonates?
It hugely resonates, and it's something that we've been continually pushing, is to redefine who the hero of the journey is. Like, the hero of the story historically in this industry has been the device, largely manufacturer-led, that says, hey, can you power it on the same information? Manufacturer says this product is 2.4 gigabongers and 27 Ujimi flips and all these things, right, where it layers features and benefits, and then that gets bombarded onto the consumer that says, here's why you should invest in this product. But arguably, if you're asking for $7,000 for 2 microchips in plastic housings with tubes coming out the end of it, that's going to be an uphill struggle. If what we can do is to help somebody understand that, firstly, they're the hero of the story for treating it, and then secondly, what they're investing in isn't the widget, it's the entire experience over a period of time, of which the widget is merely a singular component that delivers upon that moves you back into a marketplace of one. But you have to get tangible around what are the line items that somebody gets from you they don't get in the like-for-like competitor down the street. And we do a lot of work on that around, warranty, service, drop-off repair time, proactive preventative maintenance, what they're going to get in service response times if this happens, if that happens, etc. Inclusivity of batteries, access to loaner devices, drop-in clinics, remote support, right? We can line item out a lot of things that go into a bundle, but it's still hard to be able to create that true differentiator of saying, what am I really buying? So to your point is, how do you take this one stage further and say, what can people now do as a result of this? This is the result of the result of the result. It's not you work with us and you can continually hear better. It's for what and for why.
Exactly.
For what and for why, for what and for why, right? For what? So that I can continually operate at a high level in my job. For why? Because I have a responsibility to continually provide for my family. For what? So that I can actively communicate with my grandchildren. For why? Because I never had that direct connection with my grandkids, with my grandpa when I was a child, right? It's that for what and for why repeat that we can keep taking and making sure that we have case studies and examples around all of them that says we're not in the business of selling hearing aids. We're in the business of protecting future memories and moments for people.
Exactly. And if I can build on that, one lens which I think works really well, and I don't think we've talked about this one yet, is the resequence lens. And the resequence lens is all around timing, the order in which things happen, shifting when it happens. And in this case, one of the things which I want to discuss is it appears that the industry gets involved after there's a problem.
Correct.
But what if the industry were to get involved before there's a problem, knowing that people have problems? So what could you do? And another lens to go with that might be even the access lens, which is sort of like the subscription mindset. What can we give people access to, subscriptions to? Maybe it's free, maybe it's just a marketing tool. You know, Phil, you and I do this all the time. We give away things because it builds people's trust and respect for what we do. Okay, well, that's great. Well, what could we start giving away now? What could we start doing to create preventative situations? And like when I work with my insurance clients, we're always looking at, instead of how do we issue a claim after there's a problem, is how do we get zero preventable claims? That's a different question with a different result.
What I like about what you're saying here is, and we scratch at the surface on things like this with hearing health awareness months, and we are looking to be able to say, we'll test you whether you're 18, 21, 7, 35, whatever, to be able to raise the awareness of the fact that hearing loss exists, far of a greater level than people would admit it to be. Because, I mean, Stephen, even tell me from your point of view, tell me all the things you didn't hear today. Like, you just don't know, right? Is the truth of the matter. It's unlike eyeglasses where you start to see diminishing returns, so you then decide to be able to treat it. You don't squint with your ears, right? Is what happens is you just start picking up certain frequencies and those sounds are gone. So you don't know what you're missing, quite literally. So to take your resequencing point is, I'm looking at this two ways. One is, how do you get to people earlier? It would be fun to send 50th birthday cards to as many people who exist in your neighborhood, inviting them that now's the time for them to come, as opposed to the typical industry average of 60, 65, right? Is, can we get to people earlier to start to create baseline? But instead of saying, I just want to get to people earlier, define when that moment is, and then create a new environment that says new normal is, you get a comprehensive hearing evaluation at the age of 50, and then you check it every 2 years onwards from there, just like you do other key medical areas, right? As you start to be able to align it, that says, it's heart, it's blood pressure, it's hearing. Those things start to get aligned at key points. But I'd also look at your resequencing after the fact. I'm encouraging everybody to think about a different patient experience now that the world has changed. So it used to be you come for your fitting, you come back for a follow-up visit, you can come back for more scheduled visits, etc. If you can combine what is existing with technology and remote support and the ability to assist people from a distance, you can completely reschedule and restructure a post-sale experience that shows people that what you really want is the best of both worlds, right? Not direct-to-consumer tech only, not in-person only, but a carefully crafted experience that includes both of those, of in-person visits on occasion and at arm's length, plus a distance support. Now you've got a service solution offering that is different to everybody. So I'd look at the resequencing of, what does the 3 years post-sale look like in a 2021 and a non-viewpoint? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, so the key concepts of the resequence lens are predicting, postponing, and parallel. And so you hit, I think, a little bit on the predicting and the parallel, because I think in a lot of cases we're very reactionary. So we postpone decisions. We wait for somebody to do something, and then there is probably a lot of things we could start doing right now that would be predictive. For example, what if there were an app on an iPhone that allows people to actually hear the difference between, their music? Because I think for a lot of people, we tend to think about hearing loss in terms of conversation, but there's a lot of people where music would be a big deal and loss of fidelity. If there's a way to sort of predict who might be the people that are at greatest risk through some kind of app, well, now you can maybe proactively and predictively send materials to people based on responses to the app, for example. So anything that we can do to move away from waiting all this time to trying to take some educated guesses earlier, which then leads us to the insights lens, which is like, well, how do we gather more data? What data could we have? If we had more data, what would we do with that data to help us target people that are at risk that don't even know they're at risk yet, get to people that aren't, willing to come into a store to get tested. So there's, I think, a lot of things that you can do predictively with data that would also help you get some better insights and information.
So go deeper on that for me right now. You own a hearing care clinic. Let's put you in that hypothetical set of circumstance. What data would you be looking for over the next 12 months that would allow you to communicate or market better than you can do today?
I think the key thing is you have to get people into your, there's two ways. So one of the lenses is the insights lens, which is about actual data. The other one's the observations lens, which is, I think, a really interesting one. We'll talk about that one in a moment. But I think what I would try to do is I would try to find a way of getting on people's radar as early as possible. And I would find, like you said, whether it's, I know when I turned 50, the next day I got a letter from AARP. Okay, that's great. I don't know where they get their information, but it's pretty damn good. And I think every person on the planet gets a letter from them the day after you turn 50. So maybe there's ways of saying, hey, we got this cool thing. It's free. We want to get you into, not physically into the store, but how do we get you into our community? And again, it could be some kind of app or some education or some tool that we give people access to, only just to keep people aware. And then we're able to keep and check in with people and see, how they're doing. And I think that's always, to me, just a good way of, you can't gather insights on people you don't have a conversation with.
Yeah, and what I'm even thinking of as you're explaining these scenarios is sometimes this can be low tech, right? Is if you're interested in blank, then there's a good chance that you might be experiencing blank. And think about who your collaborators could be. So let's just take, for example, could the local music store be a great collaborator to introduce you to people that really need to have their hearing tested? The answer to that question is probably yes, right? They know people that come in regularly to update their guitar, get new plectrums, they like to jam out, they were part of bands, etc. in the past. Could that be a rich referral source or something that you could come back into to provide educational content towards to help people be aware of the risks to their hearing through not taking preventative measures to get earlier down the tracks? That would be one of the things that I'd be thinking of doing, and try and be more playful as to who are those potential collaborators. Like I
love that.
I tour whiskey distilleries. I love touring whiskey distilleries. I have a passion for bourbon, but almost every time I do a distillery tour, almost everybody else is on the tour is of hearing aid wearing age. Almost everybody. And, the people who are passionate about those things tend to be of that mature generation. Could you be experimental with local distilleries, wineries, etc., to be able to help them better understand the tour experience through having access to an improved hearing experience? Again, the answer is yes. So that's where I'd be playful. And I'd probably start small in your local communities, because if we take the app route or what can be created there, that's great if what you're looking at being able to do is to say, I've got tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to invest in this level of innovation. But at a grassroots level, you could choose to say, who has access and trust and interest to the type of people I'm looking to be able to serve that could provide a gateway and an opportunity for me to bring awareness to them that this is more normal than they currently believe it to be, so that they might flirt with the idea of getting tested. And Stephen, the other thing we've looked at is employers. If you want to access younger hearing care patients, is the chances are they are at work when your clinic is open. So you're open Monday to Friday, 8:30 till 5, 9 till 5, etc. Take your hour and a half off over lunch, whatever you're choosing to do. You are being preventative to how you can provide a service to the people you're looking to attract. So I did some research, and one of the big reasons that the big box retailers are winning business over expert hearing care clinics is because of the big box retailers are open late nights and weekends. So what can you do to add collaboration and convenience by showing up in people's workplaces, creating strategic alliances with significant employers within your neighborhoods and localities to say that we will provide free screening services on a once a month basis for people who want to have. We'll create educational content that can go out in their inside communications. If they employ 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 people, you'll probably find the majority of middle management, at least in that organization, are at risk to having hearing loss that they haven't yet considered. And we're changing the game there. But this is all work, Stephen. Why would you not do this work? Like, what's the cost of not?
Well, and I think a lot of people don't do the work because they're not, a lack of clarity, I think, is a lot of times the situation. I think and I love your example because I love the idea of just starting small and scaling from there. So I think a lot of us have this fear of failure mindset that we're going to try something and it's going to flop. But if you stop viewing things through that lens and really start thinking about things from an experiment, like I love your idea, go to the local music store. I mean, it's like, okay, great. And just say, hey, let us see what's going on. And even if you use the observation lens and have people there and watch them and see, okay, well, who are the people who are struggling, and then have a conversation with them. You can have some you could just create these small little experiments to test things out. I think that's brilliant.
Pens or whatever with your logo on it, brand guitar plectrums and drumsticks, whatever it might be, and show up in that environment and say, what we're doing is I know you're looking to try and get more kids using musical instruments. We're trying to get those kids to be able to educate their parents on the consequences of the noise. Can we collaborate on something there? Could I buy drumsticks for all of the kids that come through the door with our logo on it, under the condition that if they take a set of drumsticks, they provide some data?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I love these small, sort of reminds me of a dermatologist who partnered with a massage therapist and taught them what to look for, because, if somebody's getting a massage, well, that massage therapist is seeing growths, but most of the time they totally ignore them. Just by increasing their awareness, they were able to make connections. And again, it's a good preventative measure.
Yeah, and it puts you again in marketplace of one, right? If you're looking for referrals from your primary care physician, that primary care physician has had his door knocked 100 times from somebody saying, we can provide audiological solutions to them. I'm guessing the music store has never had somebody say, hey, we could collaborate from a hearing care professional point of view. So these things are, again, marketplace of one. Stephen, I'm going to give you another problem, and I'm going to ask you to think about this one from either examples you've seen in other industries or thinking direct towards hearing care. And the problem is technology changes in the hearing care industry at a rate of around every 18 months, just like Apple does with iPhones, right? Similar rate of technology improvement. And I'd go as far to say with a similar level of improvement as to where we are right now, right? Is that if you take iPhone 1 to iPhone 6, you're seeing like huge technological leaps. You go 6 to 8 to 9 to 10, etc. You're seeing more marginal leaps in technological gain. The similar thing is true within the hearing care space. We're now at marginal gains, but every 12, 18 months or so, new product, new innovation, etc., with something new to talk about. Yet the industry typically doesn't upgrade technology till more like 7 to 10 years. So how do we start to look at the problem of how do we increase the rate of sale? How do we have people hearing better by having access to newer technology shorter in the buying cycle? How do we get somebody to have 7 to 9 sets of hearing aids in their lifetime as opposed to 2?
Yeah, that might be a good example of the where is it? The access lens. So the access lens basically says, how do we move away from this mindset that I'm having transactions, but rather I'm having ongoing relationships. Mm-hmm. And maybe what you do with the ongoing relationship is instead of selling them a product, you're selling them a lifetime subscription to whatever upgrade. So software industry does this all the time. You can either buy version 7, or you can buy version 7 with lifetime upgrades, which means that when version 10 comes out, you get that. And for a lot of people, now you'd have to obviously figure out incrementally what the cost is for doing that from an industry. Software, it's a lot easier than it would be for a physical product. But I would just start thinking about those types of things. Is how do you create that protection plan that gives them lifetime access to what they need, and there's a premium for it. And I don't think we should be moving away from a premium mindset. And I think this is another differentiator also, is when you're selling over the counter, when you're selling, big box, whatever it might be, I'm going to just draw a chart here that's, this is how I see innovation. Is there's always a curve, and there's two forces that are moving. So you basically have what I'd call the low end and the high end. And so what happens is, in most cases, is companies try to target the middle of the road. How do we appeal to a lot of people? And what ends up happening is, it's like in the Karate Kid, Mr. Miyagi said, walk on left side, safe. Walk on right side, safe. Walk in the middle of the road, get squished like grape. And I think that's what happens here.
Thank you for that reminder.
So I think what happens is a lot of times we're afraid to be in the high end or the low end. They're not the same. And so the high end should be saying, we are a premium product. We are a premium service. We do charge a premium. And even during recessions, those premium products and premium services always excel. And in fact, we find in some cases, they do even better during tough economic times because people now feel like it's time for them to invest. And the low end is going to always move to the middle. So you don't want to fight it. You actually want to embrace the high end. And how can you just dig deeper into the middle rather than trying to go into the middle?
Okay. Let me share with you some of the things that we've done into this space and see what we can add to it and riff to it. One is we created a subscription brand called Better Hearing for Life. And it is exactly what it says on the tin. It's a low sum of money down at the front end. It's a monthly recurring payment with an upgrade at every 36 to 42 months. That says that you've got continued service and you are going to receive new technology over that period of time, providing you remain active with your monthly subscription. And this is going well down at the lower end of the business. The trouble is, for the majority of clinics, is the margin that is attached to the front end transaction is required to be able to keep the lights on, to be able to keep the business turning, right? They can't afford to be able to build, the time that it takes to be able to build that subscription revenue means that the lights would go out in the business too quickly. So other things we look at is a buyback, that we put a value on used hearing devices. And what that does is it means that we can create a route to be able to bring those people back into the fold. Because what I learned was one of the biggest reasons that people weren't upgrading their technology is because they didn't know what to do with their old ones. They paid a load of money for these 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. Okay, you get me to buy new, but what do I do with the old one? So we take lessons from outside, right? Is Apple want you to upgrade your computer? They buy back your old one. Is you want to upgrade your car? Somebody buys back your old one. Nobody says keep the old one as a spare, right? Because you feel like an idiot. If you've got a drawer full of phones, like I have, like you feel like an idiot, the fact that these valuable things are sitting there and you're never going to use them as a spare, but they just take up space. So we try and stay away from that, but creating a buyback is something that's definitely increased rate of sale. The other point that is a giant mistake that many hearing care clinics make is they make it too easy to keep old hearing devices on the road. So they'll charge $7,000 or so for the upfront transaction, but then when it comes to out of warranty repairs or ongoing service and support, they either do it out of their own goodwill without charge to the customer, or they create these nominal fees of like, well, $25 to do that, $45 to do that, etc. So they make it almost zero friction in order to be able to upgrade. So one of the things that I'm trying to push people more to do is to create increased levels of friction outside of those warranty periods that says, well, actually, you're putting the right value on your time in order to be able to justify those other pieces. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have experience with that specific scenario, but I will say that there's always been the concept of planned obsolescence to some degree. So I have here I have an iPhone 6. This is what I use. Yeah. But it works, but I also know that I can't upgrade to the latest operating system. So there's a point where I know it's not going to do what I want it to do. But here's I think the other key thing, and maybe it's in your industry, it's not as important, but what is the transition cost? What is it? And I don't mean in terms of money, but a lot of people don't make change because it feels as though if you are with a particular bank, you don't want to go to another bank because now all of a sudden it's just a hassle to do that. You don't want to go to another phone because you're going to have to transfer all of your data. And so I would say the more frictionless you can make it for people to come into your sphere, but then create enough friction so that it's difficult enough for them to leave or difficult enough for them to keep old equipment, that's what a lot of other industries seem to do. So it feels like a smart move to go there. And if you make it too easy for would I love to be able to run every single version of iOS on this old phone? Yeah, but also there's a point where it's going to stop doing what I want it to do. So it's smart to have sort of this obsolescence involved in everything.
Yeah, I like that. One other that we've been working on as well is this idea of creating high-end membership where people aren't paying for this bundled collaborative of service plus device. They pay for a membership for service only, and that membership gives them access to discounted hearing devices. So it means that by splitting out the transaction is instead of them looking at $7,000, $5,000, $6,000 to upgrade is they pay $100, $150 a month, etc., to be part of a membership that gives them access to all of their hearing needs, and that gives them, a third off traditional prices of the instruments themselves. And that now means that we can be more transactional in the upgrade, in the same way that the phone industry says for just $300 you can upgrade your phone, even though it's $1,000 piece of kit, because what they're doing is it's creating this other way of being able to get the revenue back through the subscription. So we're on the same page. I'm not really missing anything there when it comes to increased rate of sale. Is there anything more you think you would add that you'd see other people look at, or any other lenses that we should consider here?
Just give me a couple seconds here.
Yeah, and while Stephen's thinking on that, if you've got questions, scenarios, things that you'd like him to be able to jump towards while you're here live on the front row, then punch those into the chat or the Q&A. Love to get any of your thoughts as to what you might want from Stephen in this conversation.
So the one lens, which I don't know if we talked about, is the eliminate lens. And I really like the eliminate lens because what it does is it assumes that perfection isn't achieved when you add everything that is to be added, but perfection is actually achieved when you've eliminated anything that can be removed. And so I don't know if there's something about, now maybe this comes back to friction that you were talking about, but I'm just wondering if there's a way of really trying to strip this down to like its essence, to make it as accessible as possible in a way that maybe it's not happening right now. So does that stimulate anything there for you?
Well, it does actually, in a playful viewpoint. There's this desire to say that we want to create a 3, 4, 5 year experience that is full of all these high-end touch points. Is what I'd be looking at if I was a clinic, is to say, how many of these 30-minute, 60-minute follow-on visits are entirely necessary? How many of the human time elements that you attach towards this transaction over a 5-year period of time are 100% required for a certain type of patient? And how can you start to be able to eliminate those service steps that you're trying to get paid for in order to be able to create almost a product-only transaction that then gets repeated on a more frequent basis? That might be a way of being able to go about it, because what you're trying to do is to stretch your margin over a 3, 4, 5 year period of time so that you can be all inclusive. But you could bring a $7,000 transaction down to $4,000 and still make good money if what they did is they repeated that transaction every 18 months. Every 24 months, right, is wherever that would be. So that would be a playful way I'd look at it, is to say, well, actually, it's not extended service you need, it's repeat transactions of new technology. So every second, skip iPhone X to XR, but grab the 11. Like, it's every second one that you're starting to be able to do that, and you're creating a package that removes some of that long-term service, because you're trying to go to that tech-focused individual that wants to know that they're always in the latest technology. And by revisiting your pricing under the guise of the fact that you're only going to get your hands on this patient once or twice in that 2-year window, and then you're going to do the same again and the same again. And it's kind of an unbundled model, but I would view it more as a simplified, cleaner bundled model, where what you're doing is you're bundling everything you do need, but you're stripping out everything you don't need. So you're talking directly towards that tech-focused user, saying that you're not asking them to pay for long-term care when what they really want is latest and greatest technology on an ongoing basis. Okay.
Yeah, and one thing which I can't help but thinking is, I know we talk about the stigma and everything else, but is there a way of creating some level, and it comes back to something we talked about earlier, is some level of coolness factor to it? Like, it's almost like if I show somebody, like when I said, I've got an iPhone 6, and I watched your face feeling like, oh boy, boy, you got some old technology there. And I don't know if there's a way to do this, but, and maybe it's the bad idea lens, but how do we create something which goes from being a stigma to being something which everybody wants? Like, they want to have the latest and greatest, and how do you create it? Now, that would take a little bit of thinking, but there's something
it's
there.
There if you can teach people to be able to use it right. So Firstly, the new technology is continually looking cooler and cooler and cooler, right? You look like you've got bionic hearing as opposed to anything else. But there's other technology that exists now within the app where you can almost create a beam of sound, or you can choose things that you want to be able to focus your hearing on, or things that you want to be able to drown out. So particularly useful in a crowded restaurant, etc. But what you can do is empower a hearing impaired person with hearing aids to actually hear better than somebody who doesn't have a hearing loss. And that's where that stigma piece starts to be able to change. But what needs to happen is that person needs to move it from out of sight, and they're trying to make these adjustments where nobody can see it, to be like, I'm just adjusting my hearing devices, drop the phone down on the table and be like, mic drop, bam, I'm better than you. Right? That's what needs to happen. And I think that's going to take providers, the conversations they do have with the touch points with their patients, to start giving them the confidence to be proud wearers of hearing devices as opposed to secret hearing aid wearers. And what's interesting, Stephen, you'll find this fascinating, is one of the most searched for adjectives ahead of hearing devices in Google search is invisible. So people are looking for hearing devices you cannot see. What we're trying to say is, if we're going to look to make them cool, is how do we make them more visible, right? How do we actually start to be able to change the game that way? And I think one of the best examples of that is Beats by Dre, right? So Beats headphones stole the game from Bose, because Bose were having like a range of colors of black, gray, or beige. And Beats came out and said that you can have these in any color that you choose, and then launched at the 2012 Olympics, in fact, in a remarkable fashion, by providing all major athletes with headphones in their country colors. So the whole of the Olympic Village was surrounded by people wearing Beats headphones in their country colors. So this increasing visibility of hearing aids would be something that I would love to see more people lean into. And it doesn't mean make them pink or make them yellow. It means, can we create more proud hearing aid wearers? And it could be as simple as, people are going to be wearing badges saying I voted. What can you be doing to introduce a badge to somebody who's a proud hearing aid wearer? What can you do to be able to give people t-shirts that they wear while they're on the beach, or things that actually are going to move it from being something that is clearly invisible to something that starts to become something the person that purchased it is proud to be able to have made the decision towards. And that isn't going to be one thing, right? It's going to be a number of things, but that would be the puzzle I'd be trying to solve, is how do I create publicly proud hearing aid wearers?
And maybe we apply the variations lens, which says, how do we handle different segments and markets differently than others? And what if you had, and maybe this exists, but hearing aids for women that were designed by Prada or something to that effect, where now all of a sudden we're moving away from hearing aid as technology, but hearing aid as fashion. And obviously most guys aren't probably going to go for that, but maybe there's a market for women where now all of a sudden it's like, hey, I got this really cool accessory. And maybe there's an equivalent to that for men.
And you could take that, though, down to another level. And I always want to try and just bring this back to independent, localized, private business in North America, that what can they do? Like, yeah, we'd love a hearing device by Prada, but we need a manufacturer to be able to go out and make that thing happen. But on a local level, what if you go to the beauty salon and you look at how they're going about helping people with their regular hair do, or a local fashion retailer, etc., and say, can you collab on this of hearing devices? Like, if I was in Kentucky, for example, in Kentucky Derby, it would be hearing devices to match your hat, or hearing devices to match your shoes. Like, be playful with this thing, and you only need a handful of people to catch on and become prouder about how they're going about it, and we're in good shape. Solve this puzzle in other ways is, you might not get Prada, but is there a local celebrity that has a hearing loss that you can bring in? And I know some of you have done that with country musicians that live locally to where you are, that you've helped take care of over a period of time. We blow up that testimonial at a higher level. But we want to add credibility to the fact that treatment of hearing loss is a cool thing to do, and it doesn't have to suck. That's what we're trying to get to. Stephen, what else are we missing here is what I'm really enjoying is just the process of using your lenses, right? Is we haven't stumbled across, a revelation in an idea, but we're thinking around problems from a variety of different ways and coming up with things that we can try. Not the right way or the wrong way, but we're starting to be able to shift our focus towards how we've looked at a similar problem multiple times over. And I know from my point of view, and I know some of our team are on this call right now, is I'm guessing we're thinking of different ways of approaching the exact same thing. So my urge to everybody is to grab Stephen's book, and every time that you are thinking about how you work yourself through any form of challenge in your organization, is can I apply a couple of different lenses to this? And does it give me a couple of different answers? Does it give me some new ways of being able to think about things? Because that's where our innovation is going to come from, right? Is strategic trial and error. And Stephen's lenses give you the strategy for you to create hypothetical trial and error to come up with new solutions to existing problems. Am I seeing that right, Stephen? Is that how you'd encourage people to use it?
Well, absolutely. I think that's spot on. I think what we want to do is just try to open up people's thinking a little bit. And I think the other key, coming back to something we said before, is you don't ever have to have the answers, but you at least want to have a hypothesis. Yeah. So something that you can test out, whether it's, as you said, go to the local music store, go to the local salon, whatever it might be. So our conversation just sort of, if nothing else, highlighted some places you can go to conduct some experiments, or even just have conversations. Go into the music store and just say, well, have you ever noticed that some of the bass players or the people that come in here, do they complain about hearing loss? Are they having problems? And if so, let's see what we can do together. I think that, to me, is really the whole key here, is just start thinking about who else could you work with and how could you have some conversations and run some experiments. I think that's the key with all of this.
Yeah, and being playful, right? I like this. It's an experiment. It's not a strategy. It's not a playbook. It's an experiment, or it's something that we are being playful with and towards. Stephen, as we bring this towards a close, I'd just love to know from anybody else that's here and live. I've been framing some of the things that you've put in chat into questions to Stephen throughout. But if you have a specific ask or a takeaway that you want to be able to direct towards Stephen, now is your last chance to be able to do so. Similarly, if you have a comment or a thought around the contribution that Stephen's made towards your business today, love to be able to hear that back in the chat too. But Stephen, while we're catching some of those comments on from here, is how do people find out more about you? What can people do to better understand about how you might be able to help them navigate their businesses in the future?
Sure. I mean, I think the easiest thing is if you go to this place here, which is getthelenses.com. Basically, all that is so the 25 lenses that I shared that I was drawing on, you can download those. There's some templates. There's videos that explain how you use the lenses. So I would just start there. It's all free. Just download everything. And then, if there are specific challenges that you're facing and you want to do a hot seat where you bring me a problem and we have a conversation, I'm happy to do that. So that's the easiest way to get started.
Awesome. And Stephen, I'm seeing some comments coming in. Is Dan saying, thank you for giving us your mindset and giving me a different view on looking at this. I was incredibly impressed, which is nice. Julie's asking for how do you feel like your book would help us the most? And you answered it. So if you're listening to this and not watching this, then Stephen said to go to getthelenses.com. And in the podcast, you'll be able to catch that in the show notes so that you'll know where to go to get those resources. And I highly recommend you to make sure that you thumb through the book. Is there was so much that the book helped me with, of reminding me of thinking differently. I use it like a tool to just be able to say, what did I forget to think about here? And always it gives me some other way of being able to look at things differently. Thank you for kind words in the chat. Stephen, thank you so much for bringing yourself towards our community today. I know that the hearing care profession will be better because of it. And I look forward to someday real soon where we get to be able to hang out and connect in person again, which Absolutely. I think is going to be long overdue. So thank you, my friend, and look forward to connecting again real soon. Ta-ra for now.